Hey, what is up, YouTube? This is going to be a VOD review and a video diving into common mistakes that Lucian players make and how to approach the Victor matchup. Here we have a 2K tournament of round 3 of Lucian versus Victor, and let's hop into it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It goes a long way for me to make these videos. So here, the Victor's on the play. Their turn 1, they play a token and pass. Pretty normal. Here, the Lucian has their first decision point. So they can either play a 2-drop or they can play their Lucian. I tend to be playing my Lucian here in these spots. The reason being that the Lucian player might be thinking like, I want to play around Call of the Week, which is like a pretty good train of thought. However, I think it has a few drawbacks. The first is that Victor only plays 3 Call of the Weeks, and they only have access to 3, and they're not really a deck that can dig through their deck too much. Obviously, on the Candlelit Sanctum, we have helped them do that a little bit, but we want the Call of the Weeks to be used on cards that are not our Ruin Runner. Our Ruin Runner only has 2 ways to be outed, Imperial Decree or Call of the Week, or I guess in a normal combat where the Watcher swings over it. And Call of the Week is typically the main way that Victor wants to be able to remove Ruin Runner. If they use it on Lucian, we're perfectly okay with that, especially if they play the card on their turn 2, which will likely end up costing them in the range of like 4 to 6 energy throughout the whole game, which would then mean that their late game gets slowed down drastically. Now let's say we had played our Lucian, and let's say they didn't have Call of the Week. The upside for us on the following turns is tremendous, especially because we have this Gem Jammer. So the Victor's next turn is most likely going to look like they're going to move this token to the Conservatory or the Sanctum. It doesn't really matter which one. Our Lucian, which would have survived, can then attack them on one of the battlefields. Most likely we would secure that battlefield, even if they left 3 up for like a Wages of Pain. If we have like a long sword or blood rush or against the odds or any kind of gear that might help us live through Wages of Pain, we can kick them off of the first battlefield. The Lucian will ready himself, and then we can play Gem Jammer onto the same battlefield, gank the Lucian over to the other battlefield, and take the point tempo away from them. Also, the Victor on the following turn would be pretty hard pressed to recover both battlefields because all they have on their side is a token. So these are the few reasons why I think that you want to be playing this Lucian on turn 1. If the Victor is not able to reach their late game as soon as possible because they've also spent like one power on a Call of the Week on this turn, and then along the way maybe they play something like a Hidden Blade, or they hide a card, or they play like a Jinzhao, or whatever it is, they're just delaying their late game, and their late game is what ends up being scary for Lucian. So here the Victor is spending 3 energy to play a 2-drop and a token. Let's see if they take a battlefield. We can kind of see their hand: Hidden Blade, Stupefy, Singularity. So they take the Conservatory, and they pass. So here you guys would see like my vision of if we had played the Lucian, how we could take the point tempo away from them, and then they would be in a world of pain. We could also leave 3 up representing combat tricks by only playing the Gem Jammer. They've tapped out, so they're not able to play Wages of Pain. So here we end up playing Lucian and Challenge to kill the token that's on the Conservatory. And we pass. So I'm not sure if I agree with this play because the score is going against us here, and we haven't scored any points. The Victor player is perfectly happy. On this turn, they're going to untap, and then they can just go to 3 here, right? So we're going to be at a deficit of 0 to 3, and it's in these early games where Lucian has the best chance of stealing the point tempo and holding against Victor. Like I said earlier, like Victor can only really use Stupefy and Wages of Pain for the early game unless they're willing to spend power for cards like Hidden Blade and Call of the Week in the early game. And if they're using those power cards early, we're usually okay with that because it means their late game is going to be weaker, and we have more time to develop our Ruin Runner and Ferris Forerunners. So by allowing the Victor to be over 2 points ahead of us this early into the game, we're facing an extreme uphill battle, and we have to make multiple holds across several turns in order to come back in this game. Or we have to assemble our combo of Trinity Force and Skyfall in order to steal extra points back. Victors in the current meta are usually main decking some number of salvages, so that strategy tends to be a little bit weaker. Okay, here we see the Victor develop a token and pass. So we can assume that their hand is going to be full of combat tricks that are going to prevent us from attacking the battlefields. This would be a pretty nice turn to have Sabotage if we do have it. If we don't have it, this is also a nice turn to develop our 6-drop of either Ruin Runner or Ferris Forerunner. And if we don't have either of those, and we do have combat tricks, then we can try to poke at some battlefields. So here we opt to equip the Doran's Blade to Gem Jammer and fight their 2-drop. This makes a little bit of sense because we don't want to give them a free Conservatory trigger. They just let the 2-drop go. I don't think you can afford to let their token sit on the Conservatory, even if you have to fight them and risk giving them a free draw. I don't agree with this play necessarily. I would have liked to see this battlefield get contested as well. So the reason being that the score up here is incorrect. The Lucian's at 1 and the Victor's at 3 at the end of the Lucian's turn, and then when Victor untaps, he'll be at 4. The Victor has quite an easy path to hit 6 this turn if they want, and then the Lucian player is perpetually in a state where they have to at least hold onto a battlefield, so it's not the greatest place to be in. Also, we've played an Accelerate unit to our base. This current setup is getting ready to be wiped out by a myriad of Victor's spells. The most common one here would be Singularity, which we saw in the Victor's hand earlier. The Lucian and the Kaisa would hit the Singularity. With Kaisa, typically you want to accelerate her onto a battlefield because you want to get the draw from the Kaisa before she dies. That's pretty much the simplest way I can say it. Yep, so here the Victor player uses a Singularity. We end up losing our base. You guys can see why I think Lucian is not a unit we want to hyperfixate on this matchup. I think they're going to be able to get rid of it relatively easily between their Singularities, between their Hidden Blades. The main thing with Lucian is we don't want it to die to a Wages of Pain, straight up. We want to make them work for it. So now they pass it back over to the Lucian after playing another token into their base. They're still holding on to the Conservatory. We don't have an easy way to contest this unless we have an Accelerate. Okay, Gem Jammer works. So we hold there, and now we end up... You see how we end up fighting this token on the Conservatory and giving them the trigger anyway? I think this should have been done as early as possible, and we should try to hold on to this battlefield and make them spend their resources to get control of it again. Plus, if they want to fight us on here, we also get to trigger it and have a chance of drawing a card. And there are nice cards that we can draw here. We can draw Pursuit, we can draw Against the Odds. And with the Candlelit Sanctum, we can actually set it up in a way where we know that our next top deck would be a spell. So here, we've played a Trinity Force onto the Gem Jammer. I do like this play by the Lucian, because the Lucian player is realizing that the point tempo is slipping away from him, and he needs to come back. So Trinity Force and holding the battlefield is one of the ways to do this. Victor definitely does not want to contest the Conservatory straight up, and they want to get rid of this Gem Jammer. They just burned the Singularity, so less likely that they have a Singularity to answer both of our units. Right at this point, it's looking kind of like a Hidden Blade, or maybe like Stupefy plus Wages and then sacrifice some tokens, but they need to do something to get rid of this Trinity Force at minimum. So I do like that the Lucian has decided to take a risk here. I think this risk should have been done earlier when the Victor player did not have access to, this looks like 9 runes. If this was a play that we had tried doing when they had access to like 4 or 5 runes, we had a much, much higher chance of success. or we would at least be forcing them to spend their power, which would delay them from reaching this game state. So yeah, now they go for the Hidden Blade, and we're pretty much out of the game. Even though the drawing 2 is nice, we haven't seen one of our 6 drops, which help us win the game. You see how the Victor player is now at 6. The Lucian player will be forced to get these tokens off of both battlefields and hold on to both battlefields, or at least one battlefield. Them being able to play this Vanguard Armory and not feel the pressure of losing, going down on tempo, it means that we're pretty much just out of the game here. So now our Gem Jammer takes the battlefield, and we get to stack 2 cards, which is fine. They were tapped out, so there was no risk of that combat either. So we end up playing a Ruin Runner to the Sanctum. Yeah, we have to make holds. So, yep, equipping the Trinity Force onto the Ruin Runner makes a ton of sense. We can go from 4 to 6. You would need to top deck like a Skyfall and a Pursuit to get this Ruin Runner to the other battlefield to have a chance at winning the game. But hey, at least you're giving yourself an out if you're able to successfully hold. So they'll do a Wages to get rid of our Gem Jammer. This probably means that they have some way to attack into our Ruin Runner. They will stupefy one of their own tokens. Okay, and then they'll call the weak to get rid of it. Yep. And that's the game. So yeah, this game, I think it all came down to not taking advantage of the early game that Victor struggles with. You need to use your cards a little bit more effectively. If you had played the Lucian turn 1 and played the Gem Jammer to gank with the Lucian on the following turn, you would have been in a much better spot. Even if your Lucian had been Call to Weak early, that means that's one less Call to Weak, so that your Ruin Runner or Ferris Forerunner later in the game has a better chance of living. So I believe he put in Piercing Lights, he put in Unyielding Spirit, and he put in his 1 copy of Ferris Forerunner, so I think he's running 2 in the main deck. I agree with the Piercing Light and the Forerunner. I don't agree with Unyielding Spirit. I think Unyielding Spirit is one of those cards that I'd rather just be like more stats of some kind, more units of some kind. I'm not sure if I agree with playing Unyielding Spirit. It's good into Singularity. It's good into Bellows Breath. So you might be able to catch your opponent off guard. It just tends to be a pretty poor card overall, especially because your Ruin Runner, being one of your main ways to win the game, tends to dodge those kind of cards anyway. Piercing Light is a really good card for Victor because there's many times where they have like 2 tokens on battlefields and like 2 more tokens in base, and if you're able to wipe all 4 of those tokens, you're able to sometimes get rid of hidden cards. You're able to slow them down for like 2 turns. It tends to be a pretty strong spell into Victor specifically. It's also really good into Kaisa. I'd just like to summarize here that the mistakes that the Lucian player made in game 1, they made 2 major mistakes. One was not playing the Lucian on turn 1, taking that risk, and then that leads into mistake number 2. In general, they didn't take enough risks. They needed to play a faster early game, a more aggressive early game, and that would have helped them flip the script onto the Victor and put Victor on the back foot. So here, I believe the hand already had a Ruin Runner. It looks like Ruin Runner and a Doran's Blade. But I think if you don't have a 2-drop here, you need to mulligan 2 cards and try and look for a 2-drop. A Doran's Blade is great, but it does not really solve your problems. So we only have a Doran's Blade here. I would have loved to have a 2-drop, but it is what it is. They play a token and pass, most likely. Yep, so we end up playing the Lucian and passing. So this is all pretty standard at this point. They take the Valamos with a token, which makes sense. It's really hard for our Lucian to take Valamos, but we do have Gem Jammer at least to gank him over, so he can get out of it. If we had like a 2-drop and we could have sent the 2-drop to Valamos, it would have been really great for us. the 2-drop is perfectly fine to sit on the Valmos because their 1-drop tokens need some juice behind them in order to take the battlefield again. So here we move to Sunken Temple, most likely trying to draw a card. So they'll salvage in response to this. I think honestly salvage on a Doran's Blade is pretty okay for us, especially on the combo builds. So now the Lucian readies on the Sunken Temple. Okay, so now we choose to play a camel onto the Sunken Temple and retreat the Lucian and come back. I think this is unnecessarily playing into Imperial Decree here. The opponent had all yellow runes, so they were not short on those at all. If they play Imperial Decree and walk this token in to trade with Ruin Runner, I think it's an extremely favorable trade for Victor. Lucian has a hard time digging deeper into the deck. If you get rid of the first Ruin Runner, they're going to be really hard pressed to find the second one. So I think the Lucian player here has taken an unnecessary risk in trying to hold on to the Sunken Temple with the Ruin Runner. The Ruin Runner is a much better unit to hold onto Valmos as well, because it's immune to a lot of the removal spells. It's pretty hard for them to attack over it unless they have a Watcher. So I think the Ruin Runner is better to be placed on Valmos. And I think in this scenario, I would have put the Ruin Runner into base, because I think we're walking into Imperial Decree if our Victor player either has it or chooses to use it. And even if they don't choose to use it, we also prevent ourselves from conquering the Sunken Temple the following turn and drawing an extra card. In this matchup, drawing those extra cards is extremely important because Victor is trading 1-for-1 with their spells into our units for the most part, if we're playing it well. And if we're able to draw extra cards, they're going to gas out before we are. So they let us hold, no problem. They just play a token and pass. So they're again representing having a lot of spells and interaction. You see how the Lucian does not really want to be attacking the Valmos, so it's kind of stuck here. If we had a Gem Jammer, I would gladly gank this Ruin Runner over. It does walk into Imperial Decree, but I think if they had Imperial Decree, they would have done it last turn to get rid of the Ruin Runner. So you can see how the Piercing Light here that we sighted in is coming up nicely. It's removing all 3 of their tokens. This is giving us free turns against the Victor. I think I would like to see the Lucian hold on to the Valmos here. But okay, we have Sabotage, so there's no reason to take any risk if we don't have ways to play around Wages of Pain, for example. So we Sabotage, we see a Jinzao, Wages, Salvage, Bellows, Imperial Decree, Watcher, and Call the Weak. So our opponent is kind of just biding their time trying to get to this late game where they can then wipe out multiple units of ours at the same time. Getting this information is very, very valuable. We know that they're currently on what looks to be 6 runes, and they have 2 blues, so they could Watcher us to just fight the camel straight up. But if we leave, even if we leave 1 energy open, we can threaten punch first, so they might need to have some meat behind Watcher, unless they're willing to just risk it and ask us to have the punch first. Without that, they would need to have their token set up again, and they need to use Imperial Decree. Alternatively, they might be able to find a play with they might be able to set up for another turn with Jinzao and tokens. And because they have the Wages of Pain, the Lucian can't freely take a battlefield without some kind of gear. So this is all good information to have. Let's see what our player decides to do. We decided to take the Imperial Decree. No problem with that. I think that's acceptable. This way you don't have to retreat your camel if you don't want to. We play a Doran's Blade. We retreat the camel. I think we just pass here. Okay, so we decide to equip the Doran's Blade to Lucian. I think this is another mistake that the Lucian player is making. And the reason I think this is a mistake is because even if the Victor goes for Watchers and Bellow to kill the Lucian in the base, we're just going to develop more units the following turn, and we'll have 1 extra energy in order to bluff Unyielding Spirit and punch first. So we've not really been using this Lucian to score points either. His whole purpose so far has just been to have a buffer for Call the Weak. So I don't really think that... I think that if they want to trade 2 cards, aka the Watcher effect and the Bellows, in order to kill just the Lucian for their whole turn, I think that's acceptable for us. What I don't think is acceptable for us is equipping this Doran's Blade just for the Lucian to die at some point in the future. I'd rather get the gear onto the Ruin Runner so that Ruin Runner has a much easier time holding, even if the opponent decides to accelerate a Watcher and push in. So they do decide to salvage the gear, which probably means they have some way to remove the Lucian. And if they're able to remove the Lucian and then call the weak us at the end of the sequence, it would be quite devastating for us. But now that they played a token, they probably are not going to call the weak. So I'm surprised that the victor has decided to salvage there. They could have salvaged any time, unless they're thinking that Lucian has another sabotage. Okay, so they just play a token and pass. So, okay, so the salvage was mainly to draw a card and try and find more answers. That makes sense. Here I'd like to see... I know I said that the camel should take the Valmos, but if we don't have a way to buff the Lucian, I think the camel takes the Sunken Temple and we try to draw. But here we're at 6 runes, so if we have another 6-drop to play, we could play the 6-drop here. So let's see what our Lucian player decides to do. We decide to send the Lucian to the Sunken Temple. Okay, we have a longsword, which is great. I'll applaud the Lucian player here. I think this is really well done. Now that we have the longsword, we know that the opponent has Wages of Pain. We can equip the longsword to the Lucian. If the opponent really, really wants to get rid of the Lucian, they can repeat a Bellows Breath. And if they do that, I think we're okay with that trade. So we get the Wages of Pain, and if they don't commit another card, they kind of just lose the Wages of Pain for free, and we get to draw a card off the Sunken Temple because our Lucian is now mighty. Okay, so our opponent hasn't done anything. We ready the Lucian. We decide to draw off the Sunken Temple. Great. We decide to retreat the Lucian. And we decide to play a rearguard into base. This is kind of interesting. I do think that they're now going to be able to play Watcher and kill both the Lucian and the rearguard with the Bellows Breath. So we just kind of gave them really good value here by playing the rearguard to base. With our accelerate units, I don't like playing them to base. I'd rather accelerate those units and get the value from them that's like near guaranteed. Now that their Wages of Pain is gone, they would have to Bellows Breath the rearguard. So that's perfectly fine if they want to repeat a Bellows Breath to get rid of one rearguard. They could have done it on our Lucian, and they chose not to. So I disagree with playing this here. I think you're going to get blown out by the Watcher Bellows that you know already is in the opponent's hand. And now your Ruin Runner becomes exposed to Call the Weak. They don't have enough runes for that this turn, but then you'll be forced to play more units next turn. So I think this could have either stayed in hand or it could have gone to the Valmos. If it goes to the Valmos and they play Watcher, they can trade the Watcher and trade the token and the rearguard, and I think you're okay with that trade. They don't have enough runes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, so they could actually accelerate the Watcher. No, if they accelerate the Watcher, they can't kill the Lucian in the back, right? So you kind of make them do either or. All right. Well, the card that I was saying was not the greatest before. I think very well done by our Lucian player. This was a really good play. He set it up for the Unyielding Spirit, completely baited the opponent into burning really valuable removal cards, and he kept everything. So really well done by the Lucian player here. Now the opponent is tapped out. So we send the Lucian to the Sunken Temple, trying to draw more cards, I believe, or maybe just retreat if we have a 6-drop. Okay, so we'll just retreat this time. We do have a Ferris Forerunner, and we pass the turn to them. I think the only thing I don't like about how Lucian is playing here is that we're going quite slow on the tempo, the point tempo. It's 4-4 right now. The victor has been able to reach their late game. They're going to be able to play Watcher pretty much every single turn at this point. We've also expanded our base that could potentially get blown out. Basically against Victor, I like to set up by spreading my unit cell across 3 different locations. So I think the correct way to set up here is you want to put the Legion Rearguard in the Valmaz to kill this token and take the point. You want to put this Lucian onto the Sunken Temple, or leave him there, and you want to develop the Forerunner into your base. So now if they have Imperial Decree plus Bellows Breath on the following turn, the most they can do is either hit your base and a battlefield, or they can hit both battlefields. So in any possible permutation, they'll kill all your units, but you'll have 2 tokens and a Ruin Runner in base, and they're going to have a Watcher exposed on a battlefield ready to die because you have a gear and a Ruin Runner, or a Forerunner, or tokens, or whatever, and they'll attack for numbers big enough to beat the Watcher, so the Watcher is effectively dead for very little resources on our end, and the 2 mech tokens that the Forerunner has produced are extremely powerful in order to carry us through the end of the game. Our opponent plays another Watcher. They don't accelerate, and now they'll Bellows Breath. We're tapped out, so we don't have any Unyielding Spirit that could save us. So we end up losing the Lucian and the Rearguard. So the Rearguard, we played it, and it pretty much got us nowhere this whole time. So I would have liked to see that Rearguard at least get a point for us before dying. Even if you had set it up in a way where your Forerunner, Ruin Runner, and Lucian were all in base, and the Rearguard was on one battlefield, you're at least forcing their Watcher to enter that battlefield, and now you can fight their Watcher the following turn. So here we send the Camel onto the Valmaz finally. This is the best place for the Camel. Okay, but we decide to Pursuit it. I really like this play if we have another Pursue, or if we are confident in our ability to close out the game. Getting to 6, very, very massive. Here we again play the Rearguard into base. I still don't like doing that. I think you can just find a way to accelerate it out if you really need to. Leaving 2 up, I mean, it does force the opponent to respect another Unyielding Spirit if they want to maybe like Singularity onto the Forerunner and Legion Rearguard. But yeah, now that we're on 6, we have forced the opponent to take both battlefields and hold on to both. So I really like that play by Lucian. Obviously, the advantage is going first. You should be able to hit 6 before them. You guys can see the power of having these 6 drops in our deck. It's extremely hard for Victor to deal with them. They're really sticky. The Call of the Week is pretty much stuck in the Victor's hand this whole entire game. They haven't been able to use it at all. I'll skip ahead here. So our Victor player takes both battlefields, goes to 6. So we are now forced to break at least one battlefield in order for the game to not be over. But I don't think we have any issue breaking battlefields as Lucian. They play a Jin Zhao, they play their champion Victor, they play a token, and that taps them out. Okay. So here they have 7, and here they have 11, 15, 16. Let's assume that we have a Relentless Pursuit in hand, which is why we used the Relentless Pursuit last turn. Pause the video here, guys, and see if you can spot a lethal with Relentless Pursuit in our hand, because we have lethal here this turn. I think I did see the Relentless Pursuit in his hand, so... Okay, if you've paused the video and thought about it, the lethal here is when you attack with the Ruin Runner on the Valmaz, it'll be at 8 because of the assault from our leader. So it'll win this combat with the Thousand Tail Watcher, which is fantastic. Then we can Relentless Pursuit and move the Ruin Runner to the Sunken Temple. The Jin Zhao has tank, so we'll assign 4 damage to him. We'll assign 4 damage to Victor. Kill both of those. You'll get the Longsword back in your base. Then you can equip the Longsword to the Ferris Forerunner, and then you can attack the Sunken Temple once again. Now they have a Watcher and a token for 8, but your Ferris Forerunner is at 9, so you end up winning the game. As far as we can tell, the Victor has tapped out, so there's no interaction on their side. Yep. And here our Lucian player decides to hold. which I think is a mistake. They play a Kaisa, and they pass. So here we have 7 plus 2, 5 plus 2 for 7. We have a Forerunner for 6. So that's 13 plus 2 plus 4. So we have 19 total. And if they play a Watcher, we'll go down from 19 to, I believe, 8. We'll go, Camel will be 4. Forerunner will be 3. 4 plus 3, 7. Plus 1 plus 1. Oh, we'll be at 9, sorry. So yeah, we'll be at 9 after a Watcher. So Watcher plus token is not enough to kill us. So that might be the calculation that our Lucian player has done. We're also holding up 4, so there could be some kind of combat trick. Let's fast forward here. Okay, so it looks like our Victor player decides to accelerate a Watcher. They attack for 8. We should be at 9, so this should not be winning. I believe we don't have to do anything. We just pass. Oh, and it looks like our Lucian player has conceded. Alright, so the final lesson here for you guys is do your math properly. Check your math. Make sure that you don't concede a game that you've actually won. But I think more importantly than that is spotting the lethal. So the Lucian did have this Relentless Pursuit the previous turn. Even had another gear for good measure if you wanted to factor that in. There was lethal on board the previous turn because we had the Relentless Pursuit. So make sure you guys are keeping your eyes out for Lucian math and keeping your eyes out for lethal. So if I were to summarize this video real quick, there's a few key takeaways. Takeaway number 1, earlier in the game, Lucian is strong. Even to the mid game, Lucian is strong. Victor, once they get past, I would say, 8 runes, is when their deck really starts to operate on a level that Lucian cannot really keep up with, mainly because they have combinations of plays like Watcher plus Bellows Breath, or Imperial Decree plus Bellows Breath, or maybe like throwing out like a couple of Jin Zhaos onto the board and they can overwhelm you, whatever it might be. Later in the game, Victor has a lot more plays, but earlier in the game, the Lucian has more plays. So the Lucian players, if you're on the draw, you want to be flipping the script on the point tempo as early as possible. Get onto those battlefields, try and hold those battlefields, try and get a minimum of a 2-point lead, or at least be on an even cadence. You want to go 2, 4, 6, 8 in an ideal world. If the Victor player is stuck on 1 and you've held them to 1 while you're at 2, 3, or 4, you're doing great. You've put yourself in a winning position to close the game out. Other than that, I think just some small like sequencing things. I think holding your accelerate units in hand is especially important. Kudos to our Lucian player for setting up the bait with the Unyielding Spirit. That was a phenomenal play. I think another mistake was the Mulligan. If you don't have any 2-drops on your turn 1 play, your hand can look as pretty as you want, but you really need to have a 2-drop for your turn 1 play so that you can accelerate the point tempo in your favor. And by having a 2-drop and then a Lucian on turn 2, you've protected yourself from Call the Weak. And you've also, if the Victor ever moves like 1 token up for 1 point, you're set up in a position where you can start going to 2, 4, 6, 8, and you've gotten rid of one of their ways to contest the battlefield. And then finally, in the last couple of turns you guys saw, knowing how to lethal with Lucian, looking for the lines where you cascade your gear. Cascading gear is a pretty important fundamental of Riftbound. Applies to more decks beyond just Lucian. If you have 1 gear and you send 1 unit in with that gear, you get the extra might of that gear every single time a new unit with that gear equipped goes to fight. So if your base was Ruin Runner, Ferris Forerunner, and a Legion Rearguard, and you equip the gear onto Ruin Runner and it attacks, it's attacking for 8. If you send all 3 of them in, you're going Ruin Runner, Forerunner, and Rearguard, so 8 plus 6 plus 2, so you're going to be attacking for 16. But if you attack 8 with the Ruin Runner, and then you equip the gear onto the Forerunner, now you're attacking for 9, so you're already at 17. And then say the opponent still has more might left onto the battlefield, now you can equip your gear to the Legion rear guard, and he'll attack for 5. So now you're attacking for 22. So just cascading that gear across 3 different units means you're able to deal 22 points of damage as opposed to just 16. Alright, that sums it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It goes a long way. I'll catch you in the next one.